Yeah, hi peeps, it's Tess back in old squat box once again, and I'm doing a sort of, you know, secondary video to the one I just put up about Alfred Russel Wallace and Darwin. I mean, don't get me wrong, I mean, what Darwin did was, you know, exceptional, it was genius, but when you look at, you know, the facts of the case, the difference between him and Darwin, Charles Darwin, the guy who founded evolution, you know, the guy who got his name on it, and then you look at Alfred Russel Wallace, a guy who was born into a reasonably wealthy family, but they lost their wealth and he had to work for a living, basically as a bug collector, or a collector of animals to send back to museums and collectors in Britain. And yet it took Darwin 20 years and more to thresh out his ideas of evolution and to get the balls to publish, because basically someone might publish before him. That it was a fear that Alfred Russel Wallace would publish first that pushed him to publish. That's really what pushed Darwin to publish. He was scared. Darwin was scared to buck the people who were, you know, the sort of circles that he moved in, because they were all basically theologians as well. They were all basically religious people, and although Darwin had this idea of, you know, speciation and evolution, you know, caused by, you know, the environment, you know, he didn't really have the balls to publish when he kept thinking, I need more evidence, I've got to be able to, you know, completely refute anybody's questions, you know what I mean, about my theory, you know, my ideas. He was basically scared to publish until Albert Russel Wallace, who only took 8 years to get from, you know, wondering about, you know, why there's different animals, to coming up with the theory of speciation and you know, small change over time because of the pressures of environment and separation from you know, other members of your species, to produce mutational change, you know, that would, you know, diversify the species. You know, he took 8 years to do it, and what did he do when he thought he had a brainstorm and understood it? He wrote a letter to Darwin telling him, I think us two have been, you know, thinking about this similar thing, and I think this is the missing piece. And although Darwin had already, you know, perhaps maybe not so comprehensively, but at least somewhat understood, you know, what Alfred Russel Wallace had written to him, and knew that he was basically had come up with the same idea as Darwin had. And Darwin had known about it for 20 years and hadn't published. Suddenly Darwin rushed his book out in 2 years, The Origin of Species. And even then it still has a few flaws in it. You know. Alfred Russel Wallace took 8 years to do the same job it took Darwin 20 years to do. You know. To be honest, I think if it hadn't been for the fact that Alfred Russel Wallace had spent a good part of his life having to earn his living by capturing and collating bugs and animals and sending them back to museums and collectors in Britain, if he'd had the money Darwin had, I think he'd probably have come up with the theory of evolution and speciation a hell of a lot faster than Darwin did. I think he was probably the smarter man, or at least maybe the more bold, you know, the braver man, even for the fact that when you see the discourse between him and Darwin, I think you see that he was a meek man. He was meek and mild, wasn't after the prominence that Darwin got, although I think he was due it. I think really he was just a seeker for the truth, and that was what kept him going. You know, if you watch the video, you'll hear about, you know, what he went through, the fevers, the bug bites, you know, the suppurating wounds, the crippling of limbs through, you know, just basically climbing through forests and jungles, you know. it's, you know, dysentery, all that, you know. I don't remember Darwin struggling with that for his, you know, in his search of knowledge, you know. I suppose that's the difference between someone who's got a lot of money and someone who has to work their way through it. Should the struggle to earn knowledge and to gain knowledge have anything to do with the knowledge you gain? Well, I don't really know about that, but I have a greater respect for Alfred Russel Wallace than I do for Darwin, after finding a bit more about the history of them. Don't get me wrong, Darwin published, and he had known about it for years before Alfred Russel Wallace really sort of, you know, eureka moment. But I still think that Wallace was a braver man than Darwin, and yet, as I say, he wrote his thoughts down in a letter and sent it to Darwin, the only other person he thought in the world would understand it, and had no idea at the time that Darwin was completely going down the same tracks and had already, you know, sort of fully fleshed out most of the idea of evolution previously, because Darwin never told him where he was. Darwin had only expressed the idea that he was thinking along the same lines. He'd never expressed how far along he was in his own understanding of evolution, or the theory of evolution. So I think Wallace, to me, was a brighter and greater mind, and had more courage to go through what he went through to get there, and did it in a faster amount of time if you look at his start to finish than Darwin. And in a way it's lessened my views in respect of Darwin. You know, it's lessened my appreciation of Darwin's publication, and I've got a greater respect now of what Wallace did and what he went through, although he didn't get the acclaim or the recognition. Although he did get some recognition later in his life. And Darwin may have been pushed into it by some of the boys for the club, really, you know, what he did to Wallace. I do believe that if Wallace had came back and met with Darwin and they'd shared notes, it might possibly have been that the two of them would have shared the accolades, and maybe had co-sponsored the book. I think Wallace being away and Darwin being in England and open to the blathering, you know, bullshit from, you know, the boys in the club, from the National History Museum, or whatever it was now, the Royal Society. I think that's really what pushed Darwin into it, and I think if they'd met person to person, I think the two of them would probably have co-wrote their Origin of Species, and I think it would have been a far better book had the two of them done that. But that's just my views, you know. Anyway, I was hoping to get on Google Plus tonight with whoever was online, but I don't see anybody online. So that probably isn't going to happen, because it's starting to get late now. It's nearly 9 o'clock, and that probably only gives me an hour, 2 hours to talk before my parents will be going to bed and tell me to shut up. So perhaps tomorrow, if people want to check in around 6 or 7 PM GMT, I'll try and get a Google Plus going then, and we can get, you know, 2 or 3 hours of you know, conversation and stuff. Or maybe this subject and others, you know, whatever. Anyway, cheers guys, and thanks for watching. Swanji Var.